Once again, this is just a short check-in video as you are continuing to work on your research paper, but I'm giving you a checklist today to help make sure you're on track. At this point in your writing, you should be mostly done, and you give yourself a week to work through this list, to do your proofreading, to polish, so that you're not scrambling at the last minute, and so that you're not turning in a sloppy paper. So first of all, I have on here, does my paper follow MLA guidelines? Now, we've been talking about MLA. We talked about it several weeks ago, but this is the pattern. This is your guide. Now, if you did not get a physical copy of the MLA guidelines, you probably can find some information online. I do want to officially say, though, that will not be as good as having an actual MLA handbook from your library or on your bookshelf. It might be worth getting. You'll use it in college. But it does get updated every couple of years. So you could also get a subscription on the MLA website. They offer free trials. So you could even do that just for the next week or so. But do make sure you're checking in with that. Now, just to show you what I mean, I'm going to go online. I'm going to show you what you should be looking for and what I mean by formatting. Formatting is just a fancy way of saying how your paper looks, what kind of font you use, what size font, how far your margins, how wide your margins are, how much you indent for your paragraphs, how your headings and footers should be. Headers, footers, headings, etc. So this gives you all of that information. It's very specific. So let me pull up a web page. All right, now if you go to the MLA official website, mla.org, what you're going to run into is very limited information because you have to have a subscription. This is what I was talking about, possibly getting a membership I think they offer a free trial. So you might want to look into that because you're not going to find all this information just on their website, which is a little bit unfortunate, but there's your free trial request. So if you want to do that, it might be worth it, just doing it for this paper, getting familiar with it. Or you can go to other websites that refer to it, although they're not going to be the full comprehensive resource that you may need. But for a high school paper, middle school paper, you might be fine. So this is owl.purdue.edu. Okay, I'm going to turn off this ad. So sorry if I can. So just to give you an example, just on this page alone, the actual, if you want to pause it, this is the actual address that I've highlighted above. But you could just search on their website, MLA General Format. So this gives you a list of the paper format. Notice it's very specific. Type your paper on a computer and print it out on standard white 8.5 by 11 inch paper. This is important. You cannot turn in a paper for me, for your teacher, for your parent on pink paper. Don't do it. You can't use small paper. You cannot, this is not the time or the place to be creative. Put your creativity into your writing, not into how it's presented. Notice, double space the text of your paper and use a legible font. For example, Times New Roman. You can choose other fonts, but don't choose fancy curlicue fonts. Don't change the fonts between paragraphs. Use one font for your paper. They also recommend that regular and italics type styles contrast enough that they're distinct. So some fonts, that's not the case. And then, of course, they say to use 12-point font. No sneaking and adding 13 to make your paper longer. A teacher can tell. Leave only one space after periods or other punctuation marks. Now, you probably don't struggle with this, but people older than I am were told to do 2 spaces after end punctuation marks, and that is no longer the case. Our word processors, our other software, it does it automatically. Always have a 1-inch margin on all sides. Indent the first line of each paragraph 1/2 inch. Typically, you just use tab. Do not space bar 5 times. Create a header that numbers all pages consecutively in the upper right-hand corner. Now, if you don't know how to do these things, again, I would go on YouTube and just search what you don't know how to do, like how to do a header with page numbers. They're called running page numbers or a running header. So do that as well. Notice it will sometimes allow wiggle room when you're and give you deference to your instructor. So it says here, note, your instructor may ask that you omit the number on your first page. Always follow your instructor's guidelines. I would prefer you eliminate the page number on page 1. So the page numbers pick up on page 2. And let's see if they specify whether to do front and back. It doesn't look like it. I would prefer you do print on the front only, leave the back empty. That allows for your teacher to make notes. All right, so you can get on this page yourself. I would strongly recommend you read through the entire list. They also give an example first page of an MLA formatting paper. So this is exactly how it should look. Notice in the top right-hand corner, there is the last name of the author and the first page number. That is a proper header, but notice it's faint and light because they have formatted it so it would not appear in the official print off, but it would appear in your formatting. Notice the spacing. It's very specific. I typically, when I would type up my papers, I would type them up single space, and then I would Control A to select my entire paper, and then I would push Control 2, and that would make it double space automatically. And that's a good trick to have up your sleeve. So then it talks about section headings, which you won't need to do because our papers are simple essays. So use this to your benefit. Okay, next, do I have a title and a heading? Do I have a strong outline that's embedded in my paper? Now, the reason I worded it this way is I've had students in the past that make really great outlines that they've turned into me. And then I read their paper and it's like they just threw the outline out the window. They ignored it and wrote an entirely different paper. Your outline should be so embedded into your paper that I can go through and I can highlight it as I read, and it will be placed properly. The first sentence of each paragraph would be a line from your outline. That's how well it should be done. Just like we've talked about, you can go back and review those videos. Do I have an introduction and a conclusion? Do I have supporting evidence, 1, for each point that I make, and 2, from at least 3 different resources, all of which are listed on my Works Cited page. In other words, every time I make a claim, I say something like, 80% of boys play video games. I need to cite a resource where I got that information. Otherwise, it appears as if I'm just making it up. So you have to have evidence to support your claims, and you cannot list the same resource for all of your evidence. You may find a really good article or book that has a lot of stuff that you agree with, but if you only cite from that book, it appears like you just are writing a book summary and you've just regurgitated it onto your paper and you have no original thoughts. So you really need to show that you have read from more than one resource. It also shows that you're not biased because it shows that more than one resource agrees with you and supports the claim you're making. And of course, I hinted at the Works Cited page, but do I have a Works Cited page, which is listed according to ABC order and following MLA requirements? We have talked about this. If you need to go back to that video to review, at this point in time, it should be polished and ready to go, because when you write your paper, your Works Cited page is the last page of your paper. And it does have the title Works Cited. I just thought of something. We say Works Cited. You can't have a Works Consulted. Here's the difference. Works Cited only lists the books or resources that you used in your paper. You quoted, paraphrased, or referred to. Works Consulted is any book that you picked up and looked at and browsed in your research, even if you didn't use it in your paper. I actually prefer Works Consulted for me and for my students because it helps me see the breadth of research you've done. But Works Cited is easier and simpler. So I will leave this up to you and your parent, which one you're going to do. Works Cited or Works Consulted. Whichever one you choose, make sure that the title reflects that, the title of that page. Okay? And as always, it must follow MLA requirements. And then lastly, have I proofread my paper? I want to sit here for a second and say this. It is not okay for you to give your paper to your parent to edit or critique or mark up before you turn it in. Now, this is a strong warning for you if you are writing for any other teacher or professor in middle school, high school, or college, because then what happens is you're actually not presenting your own research paper. You are heavily depending on a parent. So no parent should be doing this. Now, if you are turning it into your parent, this is a little bit challenging because now your parent is your teacher. And you are allowed to have unlimited help from your teacher because your teacher is the one who knows what kind of help they've given. They're the one who is grading. They will hold back when they want you to fill in the gaps. So if you're writing for your parent, they are also your teacher, then you would have an agreement with them depending on how much help they're willing to give you before you turn it in, and then they edit it. Or if they want to edit it first and have you turn it in. In fact, I highly recommend going back and forth several times with your teacher/parent, making 3 or 4 or 5 revisions before you come up with a polished one. When I'm teaching writing and I have a paper that's been turned in, I mark it up all over the place. I mark every single thing, but I expect my student to change every single thing I've marked. They are not suggestions. They are requirements for them to fix. So I just want to make sure you understand the relationship here, because I've had students who've had their parents pretty much write their papers. That is not good. Not good for you, not good for your parents, not good for anybody. But again, if your parent is your writing teacher in this case and you're doing this class and your parent is the grader, editor, then every time your parent edits or marks it, you go fix it and change it and come back and turn in a new paper. Okay? So have I proofread my paper? Yes. This means the emphasis on I, not your friend, not your teacher, not your parent. Have you done it before anybody else looks at it? And make sure you do a very thorough job. Okay, I look forward to my students reading your papers. And for those of you who are writing this for your parent, I'm sure it's going to be great. So work hard and this is the last week. We're coming up on the deadline. Your final research paper will be due before our next video class. Ask your parent when they want it turned in. I recommend by next Monday morning.